When anybody struggles with an addiction, including behavioral addictions such as a gambling disorder, what happens is they make that addiction the most important thing in their life. They choose that over everything else. Sadly, including loved ones, work, they prioritize their addiction over friendships, over their own personal health. What ends up happening is their entire life becomes imbalanced. And as a result of that, consequences start to accrue. And part of recovery work, part of divorcing themselves from this relationship they have with the gambling problem, is to restore that balance. And the coaching field has long used this wheel of life balance, or the wheel of life as some call it. And this is a little tool that's been developed, and what it allows us to do as clinicians is to invite a patient to kind of map out various domains in their life and then rate them on a 10 scale as to how satisfied they are with that particular domain. And it gives this kind of a holistic perspective that they can see where things are potentially out of bounds. And in many cases at first, there are several things that they will realize that they've compromised in terms of their level of satisfaction as they rate these various domains. The domains themselves can vary, and we should be flexible as clinicians from patient to patient in terms of what those domains consist of. But historically, and in most cases, I suppose, as Paul Meyer, who was one of the originators of this back in the 60s, kind of developed this, and it's kind of taken on several iterations throughout time. But typically today, one domain is family and friends. Another domain is significant others. Their career is a third. Finances is a fourth. And as we understand, certainly with gamblers, this is one that is often compromised significantly. A fifth domain is health. Sixth is their home or home environment. The seventh is fun and leisure, and then the eighth is kind of their personal growth. Now, these can change, and as clinicians, when we're working on a wheel of life balance for our patients, we usually start with a blank paper and the circle, and we can kind of categorize these domains however we feel is most appropriate and for that particular patient that's in front of us. And after we have them rate these various domains, what I often like to do is talk about their ratings and kind of be curious about what's in front of them. Graphically, I think it can be a very powerful experience for them to see the impact of the gambling problem. And sometimes later on in therapy, I think it's okay to have them revisit this wheel of life from a blank page and have them re-rate it and then compare that to the very first one and see how they've progressed through treatment. I like some of the questions that are often suggested by various coaches on this particular tool. For example, asking the patient, like, what thoughts come up for you as you look at your wheel? What strikes you as interesting? Is there anything that's unexpected that you discovered as you look at this and the way you rated your level of satisfaction across these domains? Obviously, the elephant in the middle of the room is there anything significant going on in your life that's creating imbalance across any of these domains for which you're rating dissatisfaction? And of course, for our gamblers, it's the gambling. I often like to ask them, hey, in each of these domains, what does it look like? If I'm a video camera watching you, what does it look like when you devote time in this particular domain or this domain? And ask them to kind of expound upon that, so I can kind of get a feel for what the energy and effort looks like in the domains where they're satisfied or where they're dissatisfied. I think it's always important to ask them, in an ideal world, what would your wheel look like and what would be different if you were satisfied, and kind of help them paint that picture for you. I often, like to help them think about incremental change. When we say, okay, if you rate yourself a 3 out of 10 in this particular area, I don't think it's helpful to say, well, what would a 10 out of 10 look like? That can become daunting and overwhelming. I just say, hey, what would a 4 out of 10 look like if you're rating yourself a 3? Or, if we think back to motivational interviewing, focusing on what they're doing well, the change talk, right? If you rated yourself a 4, why a 4 and not a 3? And have them focus on some of the positive things that they're doing in terms of helping them engage in some kind of a change talk. I often am curious and invite patients to kind of say, hey, if you were to pick one of these domains to focus on the most, what would that domain be? And, obviously what needs to change for you to devote more time to some of these things within your domains. So these are just some of the suggestions that I have for how we can use the Wheel of Life in our clinical work with patients. And I'm referring everyone to this website that I think kind of goes into a lot more detail in terms of how this can be used. But I think these are some general things that we can think about as we use this in our therapeutic work with patients, this tool that comes from the world of coaching. And I think it can be very valuable in working with patients clinically and helping problem gamblers in their recovery work.